The sprawling, glass-enclosed expanse of JFK International Airport's Terminal 4 was a cathedral of transient chaos, a symphony of rolling Rimowa suitcases, frantic boarding calls, and the heavy, undeniable scent of expensive duty-free perfume masking the exhaustion of 1,000 travelers. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of crisp, unforgiving October night where the sky outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows looked like bruised purple silk. I stood near the velvet ropes of the first-class check-in lounge, my shoulders aching under the weight of 3 oversized, monogrammed Prada carry-on bags. None of them belonged to me. I was 32 years old, the chief financial officer of a rapidly expanding international logistics firm. A woman who routinely negotiated 9-figure contracts and terrified boardrooms full of seasoned executives. Yet, in the presence of my family, I was immediately reduced to a pack mule. A silent, invisible beast of burden whose only purpose was to fund their delusions of grandeur and carry their literal and metaphorical baggage. Tonight was supposed to be a milestone. It was supposed to be the great equalizer. For the past 6 months, I had meticulously planned a breathtaking, no-expense-spared 10-day vacation to Paris to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. I had secured a sprawling, multi-room penthouse suite at the Four Seasons Hotel, Georges V, a literal palace dripping in crystal chandeliers, Louis XVI furniture, and private terraces overlooking the glittering Eiffel Tower. I had arranged private VIP tours of the Louvre, chartered a yacht for a sunset cruise down the Seine, and booked impossible-to-get reservations at 3 Michelin-starred restaurants. I had paid for every single flight, every upgrade, every transfer, and every croissant in advance. It was a $500,000 gift, a desperate, final, and pathetic attempt on my part to finally buy the love and validation my mother, Beatrice, had withheld from me since the day I was born. Standing a few feet away from me, completely ignoring my struggle with the bags, was Beatrice herself. She was draped in a tailored cream-colored cashmere coat that I had bought her for Christmas, her hair blown out into an immaculate, gravity-defying helmet of platinum blonde. She was furiously tapping on her latest iPhone, her manicured nails clicking against the screen like a metronome of impatience. Next to her, practically hanging off her arm, was my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was 26. A self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer whose entire digital empire was built on a foundation of maxed-out credit cards, my credit cards, and fabricated luxury. Chloe had never worked a 40-hour week in her life. She was the undisputed golden child, the pristine, delicate flower who needed constant protection, constant funding, and constant coddling. And standing behind Chloe, looking utterly bored while chewing on a piece of gum with his mouth open, was her newest accessory. A hyper-arrogant, unemployed amateur DJ named Jackson, who had been in the picture for exactly 3 weeks. "Elena, for God's sake, move forward!" my mother snapped, not even bothering to look up from her phone. "The line is moving! You're embarrassing us by standing there looking like a confused Sherpa! And don't scuff Chloe's bags, they're lambskin." I swallowed the familiar, acidic taste of bile and humiliation that always accompanied family gatherings. I didn't say a word. I simply adjusted the heavy leather straps biting into my shoulders and moved forward, stepping up to the gleaming white marble counter of the first-class check-in desk. The ticket agent, a polished woman with kind eyes and a gold name tag that read Valerie, offered a warm, professional smile. "Good evening. Welcome to Air France First Class. May I have the passports for your party, please?" I forced a polite smile, ignoring the burning in my shoulder muscles, and handed over the stack of 4 sleek navy blue passports. Mine, my mother's, my sister's, and Jackson's. I had generously paid for his $10,000 ticket, just to keep Chloe from throwing a massive, tearful tantrum and ruining the trip before it even began. Valerie began scanning the passports one by one. The machine chirped happily with a crisp green beep for Beatrice. It chirped again for Chloe, and a third time for Jackson. Valerie printed their boarding passes on thick, premium cardstock, sliding them across the cool marble. Then she scanned mine. The machine flashed a harsh, unforgiving red. Valerie frowned slightly, a tiny crease forming between her perfectly shaped eyebrows. She wiped the back of my passport on her sleeve and swiped it through the mechanical reader again. One moment, please, Valerie murmured, her fingers flying across her keyboard with practiced speed. The clacking of the keys seemed to echo in the sudden, suffocating silence that fell over me. My heart gave a tiny, involuntary flutter of anxiety. "That's strange," she whispered, leaning closer to her monitor. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my voice calm, though a knot of dread was beginning to form in the pit of my stomach. "The booking reference is Alpha Tango 7902. All 4 tickets were confirmed and paid in full 3 months ago." Valerie looked up, her expression shifting from polite customer service to genuine, uncomfortable pity. It was the kind of look you give a stray dog sitting in the rain. "I see the original booking, ma'am," she said softly, her eyes darting nervously over my shoulder to where my mother and sister were standing. "But your specific ticket on this reservation, passenger Elena Vance, was canceled." I blinked. The cavernous terminal around me seemed to suddenly lose all its ambient noise. The rolling suitcases, the chatter, the distant announcements, it all faded into a dull, rushing static in my ears. "Canceled? That's impossible. I'm the primary account holder. I made the booking. I didn't cancel anything." "The system shows it was canceled exactly 12 hours ago," Valerie explained, turning her monitor slightly so I could see the glaring red text next to my name. Status: voided/refunded. The cancellation was authorized via the secondary contact on the itinerary, a Mrs. Beatrice Vance. The refund was processed to the original form of payment, and your seat, 2A, was immediately released and reassigned to a waitlisted passenger. The air in my lungs turned to lead. I slowly, deliberately, turned my head to look at my mother. Beatrice had finally put her phone away. She was standing there with her arms crossed over her expensive cashmere coat, her chin tilted up in a posture of absolute, unyielding defiance. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked utterly, terrifyingly smug. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice cracking just a fraction of an inch. It was the voice of a wounded child, a tone I hadn't used in over a decade. Did you cancel my flight?" Chloe let out a sharp, dramatic sigh, rolling her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck looking at the ceiling. "Oh my God, Elena, don't make a whole dramatic scene right here at the desk. You're so embarrassing." Beatrice stepped forward, invading my personal space, the cloying scent of her Chanel No. 5 making me nauseous. She looked me dead in the eye, her expression as cold and hard as the marble counter we were standing next to. "Yes, Elena, I canceled your ticket," Beatrice stated, her voice carrying a loud, theatrical resonance designed to ensure the other wealthy passengers in the lounge could hear her perfectly. "Jackson's friend from the club, Tyler, needed a last-minute flight to Paris for a music festival. He was absolutely desperate. So I transferred your seat to him." My brain struggled to process the sheer, unadulterated audacity of the words coming out of her mouth. You gave my first-class ticket to Jackson's friend? A stranger, on the trip I paid for your birthday?" "Oh, stop playing the victim," my mother hissed, her lips curling into a sneer of pure disgust. "Let's be completely honest, Elena. You are exhausting to travel with. You're always so serious, always so tight-lipped, always trying to control the itinerary with your little spreadsheets. Chloe and I are going to Paris to celebrate, to let loose, to have fun. You're a buzzkill. You're 32, single, and honestly, you're just pathetic to be around when we are trying to enjoy a luxurious atmosphere. You don't fit in with this aesthetic. She gestured vaguely to herself, Chloe, and the unemployed DJ who was now laughing softly under his breath. Besides, Beatrice continued, her tone patronizing, as if she were explaining basic math to a slow toddler. Tyler actually paid me cash for the seat, so really, I did you a favor. I made sure the money wasn't wasted. You can just go back to your boring little apartment, work on your spreadsheets, and we'll send you a postcard from the Eiffel Tower. Don't worry, we still have all your reservation details for the Georges Saw Hotel and the dinners. We won't let your hard work go to waste. She reached out, grabbed the 3 printed boarding passes from the stunned ticket agent's counter, and shoved the heavy Prada bags toward me. Now, be a good girl and watch the bags while we go through the VIP security lane. You can take an Uber home. For 10 excruciating seconds, the world completely stopped spinning. I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister, who was already fixing her lip gloss in the reflection of her phone, completely indifferent to the psychological slaughter that had just occurred. I looked at Jackson, who offered me a mocking, half-hearted salute. In that frozen span of time, something deep, profound, and fundamental snapped inside my chest. It was not a violent, explosive fracture. It was the quiet, definitive click of a heavy vault door swinging shut, sealing itself forever. For 32 years, I had chased the phantom of their approval. I had allowed them to drain my bank accounts, step on my dignity, and use me as their personal emotional punching bag, all while convincing myself that if I just bought them one more trip, one more designer bag, one more flawless experience, they would finally look at me and see a daughter, a sister, a human being. But as I stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of Terminal 4, looking into the empty, parasitic eyes of my mother, the truth finally set me free. They didn't love me. They never had. And they never would. I wasn't family to them. I was an ATM. I was a host organism for their endless, insatiable greed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't fall to my knees and beg for an explanation. Instead, a slow, terrifyingly calm smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a CEO who has just discovered a fatal flaw in a hostile competitor's corporate strategy. It was the smile of a predator. The ticket agent, Valerie, was staring at me with wide, horrified eyes, her hand hovering over her phone, clearly unsure if she needed to call airport security to intervene in an impending meltdown. But there would be no meltdown. "You're right, Mother," I said, my voice shockingly smooth, devoid of any tremor or sorrow. "I am a buzzkill. I wouldn't want to ruin your aesthetic." Beatrice looked momentarily taken aback by my complete lack of resistance. She had been armed and ready for a screaming match, a public spectacle she could use to further victimize herself. My calm compliance clearly unsettled her, but her vanity quickly overpowered her confusion. "Well," Beatrice huffed, adjusting her cashmere collar, "I'm glad you're finally showing some maturity. We will call you when we land. Try not to mope all week." "I won't," I replied, stepping back from the Prada bags, leaving them sitting in the middle of the marble floor. "Have a wonderful flight. Enjoy Paris." I turned my back on them without another word. I didn't look over my shoulder as I walked away, my heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic cadence against the polished terminal floor. I could hear Chloe whining about having to carry her own bag, and Beatrice snapping at Jackson to help, but their voices quickly faded into the ambient noise of the airport, completely irrelevant. As I walked toward the sliding glass exit doors, stepping out into the cool, biting New York night air, I reached into my designer handbag. My fingers bypassed the useless, voided passport and closed around the cool, heavy metal of my American Express Centurion Black Card. My mother, in her sheer, blinding arrogance, had made a catastrophic miscalculation. She assumed that because she had the booking reference numbers and the hotel confirmations, she had the keys to the kingdom. She thought she had outsmarted me, discarding the mule while keeping the gold. But she didn't realize one crucial, devastating detail. The penthouse suite at the Four Seasons George Zick, the VIP Louvre tour, the private yacht, the 3 Michelin-starred dining reservations, the chauffeur service waiting at Charles de Gaulle Airport. None of it was prepaid. In the realm of ultra-luxury travel, you don't prepay. You hold the reservations with a card on file, and the final astronomical bill is settled upon completion of the services, heavily dependent on the physical presence of the cardholder and the active, unfrozen status of the account. I stopped on the sidewalk as a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. I unlocked my smartphone, the screen glowing brightly in the darkness. I opened my banking app, navigating to the concierge services tab for my Black Card. My family was about to board a luxurious 7-hour first-class flight across the Atlantic Ocean, drinking free champagne and dreaming of a Parisian paradise. They were flying at 500 miles an hour, completely blind, straight into a brick wall of unimaginable financial ruin. With a single, deliberate tap of my thumb, I selected the option: Report card lost/stolen. Freeze all accounts immediately. Cancel all pending authorizations. The screen loaded for a fraction of a second before displaying a bright green checkmark. Account frozen. All holds released. I slid into the back of my town car, the heavy door closing with a satisfying airtight thud, completely shutting out the noise of the airport. "Where to, Ms. Vance?" my driver asked, looking at me through the rearview mirror. "Take me home, Marcus," I said, leaning back into the plush leather seats, a genuine laugh bubbling up from the depths of my chest. "I have a sudden, glorious opening in my schedule, and I wouldn't want to miss a single phone call tomorrow. Let us freeze the frame right here." The heavy armored door of the black town car has just slammed shut, sealing with a thick, satisfying thud that completely cuts off the chaotic, fluorescent purgatory of JFK Terminal 4. The engine purrs to life, a deep, resonant rumble of a twin-turbo V8, and the vehicle glides effortlessly away from the curb. The sprawling glass facade of the airport, the frantic travelers, the rolling luggage, and the ghosts of my parasitic family are all rapidly shrinking in the rearview mirror, swallowed up by the crisp, purple-black, bruised silk of the October night. I am sitting in the cavernous back seat, bathed in the soft, ambient orange glow of passing streetlights that rhythmically wash over the pristine leather interior. In my hand, resting against my knee, I am holding a piece of black titanium, my American Express Centurion card. It is a small, heavy, unassuming piece of metal, yet, at this very moment, it possesses the destructive capability of a tactical financial nuclear warhead. It is the detonator that is about to nuke my family's entire fabricated existence. But before we move forward in the timeline, before I show you the exact, microscopic, excruciating details of the financial and social annihilation that is about to rain down on Beatrice, Chloe, and the unemployed DJ halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, I need to abruptly pause this narrative. I need to step out of the memory, look directly into the camera, and talk directly to you. Yes, you. The person sitting behind this screen right now. I know exactly why you clicked on this video. I know the heavy, invisible weights you carry in your chest every single day. I know the precise taste of that bitter, acidic bile that rises in the back of your throat when your phone vibrates, you look down at the screen, and you see their name flashing. I know the sudden, involuntary spike of adrenaline, the tightening of your jaw, the familiar, suffocating dread that washes over you before you even swipe to answer. You are the workhorse. You are the fixer. You are the ATM, the emotional punching bag, the safety net, and the designated shock absorber for a family system that is fundamentally, irreparably broken. If you are watching this, if my story has already caused your heart rate to elevate in just the first few minutes, there is a very high probability that you are the Elena of your own family. You are the one who studied late into the night under the dim light of a desk lamp while your siblings were out partying, making terrible decisions, and squandering their potential. You are the one who ground your teeth, took the extra shifts, built a career, built a formidable savings account, and built a life out of sheer, unadulterated grit and raw willpower. And yet, despite all your monumental achievements, you are the one whose own flesh and blood looks at your success not with pride, not with admiration, but with a deeply ingrained, sickening sense of entitlement. They look at your hard-earned bank account and see a community asset waiting to be plundered. They look at your carefully constructed boundaries and perceive them as a vicious personal insult. They look at your exhaustion, your burnout, the dark circles under your eyes from carrying the weight of their world, and they have the sheer audacity to tell you that you just aren't trying hard enough, that you are being selfish, that you owe them more. Let us take a moment to aggressively dismantle the grand, sick illusion we are sold from the moment we take our first breath. Society, culture, and religious institutions force-feed us this toxic, suffocating fairy tale narrative that blood is thicker than water. We are relentlessly indoctrinated to believe that family is an unbreakable, sacred bond, a covenant that demands infinite forgiveness, infinite patience, and, most destructively, infinite financial bailouts. We are programmed to believe that no matter how severely a parent or a sibling abuses us, disrespects us, or drains us dry, we must turn the other cheek because they are family. We are sold the catastrophic lie that if we just love them enough, if we just buy them the right gifts, if we just host the perfect, picturesque holidays, and if we just swallow our pride and apologize one more time for things we never did, they will eventually wake up. We believe that one day the fog will clear. They will look at us with profound realization, and they will finally give us the love, respect, and validation we have been starving for since childhood. It is the most dangerous, insidious lie ever told to successful, empathetic people. For 32 years of my life, I bought into that lie, hook, line, and sinker. I poured my soul, my mental energy, and hundreds of thousands of dollars into a bottomless, black hole of narcissistic validation. I genuinely thought that by organizing a breathtaking $500,000 Parisian birthday extravaganza, by laying the absolute best the world had to offer at my mother's feet, I could finally purchase a seat at her table. I thought I could buy my way out of the scapegoat role and finally be seen as a daughter. But here is the brutal, uncensored psychological truth about people like my mother, Beatrice, and my sister, Chloe. They are emotional and financial vampires. And a vampire does not love the blood bank. A vampire does not feel gratitude toward the blood bank. A vampire simply expects the blood bank to remain open 24 hours a day and only feels visceral, burning resentment when the blood bank finally locks its doors. Think about the absolute, sheer, breathtaking audacity of what just transpired at that first-class check-in desk. I want you to truly analyze the psychological mechanics required for a mother to look at her own daughter, the daughter who orchestrated and funded the luxury vacation of a lifetime, and calmly, viciously give away her first-class seat to a literal stranger. It is a profound level of cruelty that defies basic human logic. But you have to understand, it wasn't thoughtless. It wasn't a mistake. It was highly calculated. It was a strategic power play designed to remind the scapegoat of their exact place in the hierarchy. Her actions were designed to broadcast a very specific message. You may have all the money, Elena, but I have the absolute power to humiliate you. I have the power to exclude you. I have the power to erase you from the very experience you paid for, and there is nothing you can do about it. And in those moments of engineered public humiliation, what do the toxic abusers expect us to do? They expect us to crack. They expect us to cry, to hyperventilate, to throw a massive, embarrassing tantrum right there on the marble floor. They expect us to fall to our knees and beg for an explanation, beg for our ticket back, beg for their mercy. Because when we react emotionally, when we lose our stoic composure and let the pain show, it gives them the exact ammunition they need to validate their twisted narrative to the rest of the world. Look at her, they will whisper to their friends, pointing at our tears. Look how unstable she is. Look how dramatic and aggressive she is being over a simple misunderstanding. We are the victims here. We have to walk on eggshells around her. They feed on our emotional dysregulation. Our pain is their absolute favorite delicacy. But the moment you stop reacting, the exact moment the heavy steel vault door in your chest clicks shut and the lock engages, you instantly become the most dangerous, terrifying person in the room. When you strip them of your emotional response, you strip them of their oxygen. Right now, I want you to take a deep, grounding breath. I want you to look around whatever room you are sitting in. Look at the walls you pay for. Look at the life you have built. I want you to ask yourself a very hard, very uncomfortable, deeply confronting question. How much of your precious life force, your hard-earned wealth, and your mental sanity is currently being drained to fund the delusions of people who wouldn't even cross a puddle to pull you out of a raging fire? How many times have you co-signed a predatory loan, paid a massive rent check, or funded a lavish lifestyle for a golden child sibling who has never been held accountable for a single mistake in their entire adult life? How many times have you sat silently at a beautifully set dinner table, biting your tongue until you tasted copper, while a narcissistic parent actively belittled your incredible achievements, mocked your career trajectory, or compared you unfavorably to a cousin who hasn't accomplished a— How many times have you set yourself on fire just to keep toxic people warm, only for them to complain about the smoke? If this is resonating with you on a molecular level, if your chest is tightening right now because this story is violently mirroring your own lived reality, I need you to do something for me. And I need you to do it right now. I need you to scroll down to the comments section. I want to know exactly who you are and where you are watching this from. Are you sitting in a high-rise office in Dallas, Texas? Are you on a rainy commute in London? And then I need you to smash that like button. Do not just politely tap it. Hit it with the exact amount of force, the exact amount of pent-up rage and exhaustion that you wish you could use to permanently slam the door on every toxic, manipulative relative who has ever used you as— Next, I need you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Why am I asking you to do this? Because this YouTube channel is not just a place for passive entertainment. By hitting subscribe, you are not just following an account. You are planting a flag in the ground. You are joining a rapidly growing global community of strong, fiercely independent, brilliantly successful people who have looked the toxic family dynamic dead in the eye and said, "No more. The bank of me is permanently closed." We are building an army. Have you ever had to teach a toxic family member a lesson they will never, ever forget? Have you ever had to execute a flawless, surgical extraction from a family system that was bleeding you dry, physically, emotionally, and financially? Have you ever dropped the rope and watched them fall? I want to read your stories. I read every single comment on these videos. Drop your experiences, your triumphs, and your brutal realities in the comments below. Because I promise you, someone else scrolling through this video is sitting in the dark right now, feeling completely alone, utterly defeated, and drowning in guilt. Your story, your specific victory, might be the exact spark they need to finally realize their worth, freeze their own accounts, and walk away into the light. Let me tell you something vital about vengeance. When we talk about revenge fantasy and justice porn, people often picture screaming matches. They picture throwing drinks in people's faces, dramatic physical confrontations, and stooping to the pathetic, mudslinging level of the abusers. But as you will soon see, true, cinematic, devastating vengeance is not loud. It is not messy. True vengeance is entirely bureaucratic. True vengeance is deeply financial. True vengeance is the terrifying. Right now, in our story, Beatrice, they are flying at 500 miles per hour toward a luxurious destination that mathematically and legally no longer exists for them. They think they won. They are likely toasting to their own brilliance, convinced they successfully humiliated the mule, discarded the dead weight, and kept all the magnificent gold. They have absolutely no idea that in the shadowy, high-stakes world of the ultra-wealthy, a deliberately frozen American Express Centurion card is the logistical equivalent of a severed femoral artery. The elite concierge service at Amex isn't just stopping future charges. They are actively, aggressively dismantling the entire digital and financial infrastructure of the trip. The dominoes have already started to fall across 2 continents, and by the time the wheels of their Air France jet touch down on the tarmac at Charles de Gaulle Airport, the reality they step into will be a waking, inescapable nightmare of their own making. So, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you have liked this video. Get comfortable, pour yourself a drink, and prepare yourselves. Because we are about to head back into the timeline, and I'm going to take you deep into the psychology of how we got to this point. I'm going to show you exactly why my mother favored Chloe, exactly how I became the silent provider, and exactly why walking away was the only option left. And then, I am going to show you how my mother's perfect aesthetic was violently, legally, and spectacularly dismantled on the imported marble floors of a Parisian palace. Let's get back to the story. To truly understand the exquisite, devastating poetry of a canceled American Express black card, you have to understand the monstrous financial machinery it was previously powering. You have to understand the decades of meticulous, insidious psychological conditioning that turns a brilliant, self-made woman into a subservient, silent ATM for people who actively despise her. As my town car glided silently through the dark, rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, the adrenaline of the airport began to recede, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of neon gold and crimson, and allowed myself to look back. I didn't look back with longing or sadness or regret. I looked back with the clinical, detached precision of an auditor examining a bankrupt corporation's fraudulent ledgers. The Vance family dynamic was not a home. It was a highly produced, heavily leveraged Broadway play, and my mother, Beatrice, was the tyrannical director. The stage for this lifelong production was a sprawling, overly ornate McMansion nestled deep in a hyper-exclusive, gated zip code in Westchester County. From the outside, the house was a monument to the American dream on steroids. It boasted towering fake Tuscan columns, a meticulously manicured front lawn that looked like an expensive emerald carpet, and a sweeping, circular gravel driveway designed specifically to showcase imported luxury vehicles. Inside, it was a suffocating museum of staged perfection. The air always smelled faintly of expensive lemon oil furniture polish and eucalyptus diffusers. Every room was violently over-decorated with heavy silk drapes, massive crystal chandeliers that required professional cleaning twice a year, and oversized gilded mirrors strategically placed so Beatrice could admire her own reflection from any angle. It was a house built entirely on the fragile, desperate foundation of keeping up with the Joneses. My late father, Richard, had been a mid-level regional manager at an insurance firm. He was a quiet, cowardly man who dealt with his wife's terrifying vanity by retreating to his study with a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan and a golf magazine, actively ignoring the mountain of credit card debt quietly accumulating in his name. When he suffered a massive, fatal heart attack when I was 22, he left behind a visually stunning estate and an absolute catastrophic mess of hidden second mortgages, maxed out lines of credit, and predatory loans. By the time the dust settled on the probate, the Vance family was functionally destitute. The grand Westchester facade was weeks away from the foreclosure auction block. At that time, I was working 80-hour weeks, having clawed my way through a grueling finance degree on full academic scholarships and a part-time job waiting tables. I was eating instant ramen in a tiny, unheated studio apartment in Brooklyn, hoarding every single penny I earned at my entry-level analyst position at a cutthroat Wall Street firm. Chloe, on the other hand, was 19. She was living at home, sleeping until noon, and spending her days lounging by the pool. When the financial reality of my father's death hit, Beatrice did not get a job. She did not downsize the massive, suffocating house. She did not sell the country club membership or the designer jewelry. Instead, she summoned me to Westchester, sat me down at the massive imported mahogany dining room table, and cried. She wept beautifully, dabbing her dry eyes with a monogrammed linen handkerchief, playing the role of the helpless, grieving widow to absolute perfection. She told me that if she lost the house, the shame would literally kill her. She told me that Chloe was too fragile, too emotionally delicate to handle a disruption in her environment. She looked at me, her eldest daughter, who had never asked her for a single dime since turning 18, and she handed me the crushing, insurmountable weight of their manufactured reality. And I, desperately starving for just a fleeting ounce of my mother's approval, took the leash and fastened it around my own neck. Over the next 10 years, my career skyrocketed. I was a shark in the boardroom. I had a terrifying head for numbers, an eidetic memory for contract loopholes, and an unyielding, aggressive negotiation style that terrified men twice my age. I moved from an analyst to a director, and finally to the chief financial officer of a global logistics empire. I was making high 7 figures. I was a titan of industry. Yet, every single time I returned to Westchester, I was instantly demoted to the hired help. I paid off the second mortgage. I paid the exorbitant property taxes. I paid the monthly country club dues so Beatrice could sit on the veranda, sip extremely dry martinis, and brag to her wealthy, Botox-injected friends about her fabulous life. But my financial contributions were never acknowledged as generosity. They were treated as a mandatory tax. Beatrice completely compartmentalized my success. In her twisted, elitist worldview, women who worked as hard as I did were masculine and unrefined. She viewed my corporate aggression with open disgust, frequently telling her friends that it was such a shame Elena doesn't have the time to find a husband. She's just so obsessed with those little spreadsheets of hers. I was the dirty secret that funded the pristine illusion. And then there was Chloe, the golden child, the fragile, beautiful parasite. If Beatrice was the director of the play, Chloe was the star. From the moment she was born, Chloe was treated as a rare, precious artifact that needed to be shielded from the harsh realities of the actual world. While I was forced to get a job at 16 to pay for my own bus pass and school supplies, Chloe was handed the keys to a brand new Mercedes convertible on her 17th birthday. While I was studying until 3 a.m. for advanced calculus exams, Chloe was being excused from school because she felt a little overwhelmed by the energy of the classroom. As we grew into adults, the disparity did not just widen. It became a yawning, inescapable chasm of disrespect. Chloe decided she did not want to go to a traditional college. It was too stifling for her creative aura. So, Beatrice manipulated me into funding a series of increasingly absurd, catastrophic business ventures for the golden child. First, there was the organic, vegan, cruelty-free skincare line. I fronted $80,000 for the initial inventory and branding. Chloe lost interest after 3 months because packaging boxes made her back ache. The inventory rotted in the Westchester garage. Then came the luxury lifestyle influencer phase. This required me to pay a $5,000 a month retainer for a PR agency, completely fund a wardrobe of Gucci, Prada, and Balenciaga, and pay for first-class flights to Dubai, Mykonos, and Tulum so she could take photos of her legs by various infinity pools. When I gently suggested that she needed to start generating actual ad revenue to offset the massive hemorrhaging of cash, Beatrice flew into a blinding, terrifying rage. "How dare you!" Beatrice had screamed, her face contorting into a mask of pure venom, slamming her hand down on the marble kitchen island. "Your sister is building a brand! She is an artist! You are just a human calculator, Elena! You have absolutely no concept of aesthetics or creativity. You make more money than God, and you are trying to suffocate your sister's dreams over a few measly dollars? You are incredibly selfish." I had stood there, staring at the woman whose entire life was subsidized by my measly dollars, feeling the familiar, suffocating knot of injustice tighten around my throat. I didn't argue. I didn't point out that her brand consisted of 3,000 bot followers and a maxed-out platinum card. I just went back to the city, worked another 80-hour week, and transferred another $20,000 into Chloe's checking account to keep the peace. I was a hostage. But I wasn't tied up with ropes. I was paralyzed by the toxic, deeply ingrained belief that my only value as a human being was my utility to them. If I stopped paying, I stopped existing. The Paris trip, the magnificent $500,000 disaster that was currently flying over the Atlantic, was born out of this exact dynamic. 6 months ago, we were sitting in the Westchester dining room. It was Beatrice's half-birthday, an absurd milestone she insisted on celebrating. Chloe was aggressively stabbing a piece of salmon, complaining loudly about how depressed she was. Her latest venture, a boutique yoga studio that I paid the lease for, had failed spectacularly because she refused to wake up before 11 a.m. to unlock the doors. "I just feel so stagnant," Chloe whined, dramatically resting her forehead on her hand. "I need inspiration. I need to be surrounded by beauty. Everything in America is just so basic. Beatrice immediately reached over and patted Chloe's hand, her eyes swimming with manufactured sympathy. I know, darling. You have such a sensitive, refined soul. You absorb the toxicity around you. Beatrice then slowly, deliberately turned her gaze to me. It was the look of a predator locking onto its prey. Elena, you know my 60th birthday is coming up this fall. I know, Mom, I said cautiously, setting my fork down. I have sacrificed my entire life for this family, Beatrice proclaimed, her voice trembling with the precise amount of theatrical emotion. I stayed in this house. I raised you girls. I never got to see the world. I want to go to Paris. I want to stay at the Georges V. I want to see the Louvre without the unwashed masses crowding me. And Chloe needs this, Elena. She needs the cultural reset. It would be the most beautiful, healing thing you could possibly do for your family. She didn't ask me if I could afford it. She didn't ask me if I had the time off work. She issued a royal decree and expected the royal treasury to open its vaults. And the saddest, most pathetic part of the entire memory? I eagerly agreed. Deep down, in the darkest, most broken corner of my inner child's heart, I genuinely believed that this was the key. I thought that if I could orchestrate the most flawless, luxurious, breathtaking experience of her entire life, Beatrice would finally have to acknowledge me. She would have to look at me across a candlelit table at a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant, raise a glass of vintage champagne, and say, I am proud of you, Elena. Thank you. I spent months planning it. I used my elite concierge contacts to secure impossible reservations. I booked the penthouse. I arranged the private yachts. I poured my soul into creating a masterpiece of luxury, entirely designed to win the love of a woman who viewed me as nothing more than a biological bank account. And how did she repay that monument of devotion? By standing at the first-class check-in desk, looking me dead in the eye and handing my seat to an unemployed DJ's random friend, simply because I didn't fit her aesthetic. She stripped me of the experience I paid for, humiliated me in public, and expected me to carry her bags to the security checkpoint before quietly taking an Uber back to my lonely apartment. As my town car finally pulled up to the imposing, heavily guarded entrance of my high-rise luxury building in Tribeca, a profound, unshakable sense of peace washed over me. The toxic fog of guilt, obligation, and desperate yearning that had clouded my judgment for 32 years had completely evaporated. The scared, desperate little girl who just wanted her mother to love her was dead. In her place sat a ruthlessly efficient, fiercely independent titan of industry who had just been handed the ultimate moral justification to burn her abuser's world to the ground. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air feeling like a baptism. I walked past the nodding doorman, stepped into the private elevator, and pressed the button for the penthouse. Tomorrow morning, the sun was going to rise over Paris, and when it did, the Vance family was going to experience a level of catastrophic, unrelenting financial violence that they could not even begin to comprehend. The Bank of Elena was permanently closed, and it was time to issue the final, devastating audit. The sun rose over Manhattan the next morning, not with a whisper, but with a blinding, triumphant glare that cut through the floor-to-ceiling soundproof windows of my corner office. It was 8 a.m. in New York, which meant it was exactly 2 p.m. in Paris. While my mother, my sister, and the unemployed DJ were stepping off their luxurious Air France flight and blindly walking into a perfectly laid trap, I was stepping into my true element. The corporate headquarters of Vanguard Logistics occupied the top 5 floors of a gleaming glass and steel skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. My office, located on the 72nd floor, was a sprawling fortress of absolute power. Heavy oak doors, thick enough to stop a bullet, guarded the entrance. Inside, the floors were imported Brazilian walnut, polished to a mirror shine. A massive, custom-built desk of solid black marble dominated the room, completely devoid of clutter, save for 3 sleek computer monitors and a single crystal carafe of ice water. When I walked through those heavy oak doors, I wasn't Elena the scapegoat. I wasn't the pack mule, the silent bank account, or the buzzkill who ruined my sister's aesthetic. I was the chief financial officer of a global empire that moved billions of dollars in freight across 4 continents every single fiscal quarter. I commanded a department of 200 elite analysts, accountants, and corporate lawyers. When I spoke in the boardroom, billionaires stopped talking and took notes. I took a sip of my dark, bitter espresso, feeling the heat radiate through my chest. I stood by the glass wall, looking down at the tiny yellow taxicabs crawling along the streets of Lower Manhattan like insignificant insects. I checked the gold Rolex Daytona on my left wrist, 2:15 in Paris. They would have cleared customs by now. Because I had canceled the luxury chauffeur service, they would have been forced to navigate the absolute chaos of the Charles de Gaulle taxi queue with all their heavy, lambskin luggage. I could already picture Chloe, her lip gloss perfectly applied, completely melting down on the dirty Parisian sidewalk while Jackson uselessly stared at his phone. I walked over to my black marble desk and sat down in my high-backed Italian leather chair. I tapped my keyboard, waking up the monitors. On the center screen, I opened a secure window to my personal offshore banking portal. I brought up the ledger for the account I used to fund my family's fabricated reality. I looked at the numbers, the immense, sickening sums of money I had bled out over the past decade. 2:30 in Paris. They would be arriving at the 8th arrondissement right about now. They would be pulling up to the magnificent, awe-inspiring facade of the Four Seasons Hotel, Georges V. I imagined them stepping out of their taxi, Beatrice tipping her chin up, breathing in the scent of Parisian wealth, completely ready to assume her rightful place on the throne I had supposedly purchased for her. I closed my eyes and mentally counted down. I knew exactly how long it took to walk through the heavy, gilded revolving doors, step onto the pristine marble floors of the lobby, bypass the towering centerpieces of imported white orchids, and approach the concierge desk. 5, 4, 3, 2. The jarring, urgent vibration of my personal cell phone shattered the quiet of my office. It was sitting face up on the cool marble of my desk. The screen flashed bright white, illuminating a contact name I hadn't changed in over a decade. Mother. I didn't answer it immediately. I let it ring. I sat back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers, and watched the phone vibrate across the desk, completely unbothered. I let it ring until it rolled over to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it started ringing again. This time, I picked it up. I didn't press it to my ear. I pressed the green icon, hit the speakerphone button, and set the phone gently back down on the desk, the microphone picking up the crisp acoustics of my massive office. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the ice water in my crystal carafe. "Elena, finally!" Beatrice's voice exploded from the speaker, shrill, frantic, and dripping with an entitlement so thick it was almost suffocating. The background noise on her end was a chaotic symphony of hushed, elegant hotel lobby murmurs and my sister's unmistakable, high-pitched whining. "Where have you been? I have been trying to reach you for 10 minutes, Beatrice barked, not bothering to ask how I was or if I had made it home safely from the airport the night before. "You need to fix this immediately. I am standing at the reception desk of the George V, and the concierge here, who is being impossibly rude and condescending, by the way, is claiming that the card on file is frozen. Is that so? I replied, my tone deliberately detached, picking up a Mont Blanc pen and slowly twirling it between my fingers. Yes, it is so, Beatrice snapped, the panic beginning to edge into her voice, warring desperately with her arrogance. They are demanding another form of payment for the incidentals and to hold the suite. 100,000 euros, Elena. They are treating us like absolute criminals. Chloe is practically in tears, people are staring at us, and Jackson is having to stand by the bags like a bellhop. You need to call American Express right now, yell at whoever you need to yell at, and tell them to authorize this transaction. This glitch is completely unacceptable. She still didn't get it. Even standing in the middle of a foreign country, her card declining for a 6-figure hotel bill, her narcissism was so profoundly deep that she literally could not comprehend that I had orchestrated this. She thought it was a bank error. She thought she was still the master, and I was still the obedient dog who had simply forgotten to clear a security fraud alert. There is no glitch, Mother, I said softly. The silence that followed was absolute. On her end of the line, I could hear the faint classical piano music playing in the lobby of the George V. I could hear Chloe's whining abruptly stop. What do you mean there's no glitch? Beatrice asked, her voice dropping an octave, the first genuine sliver of fear finally piercing through her armor of entitlement. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the cold marble desk. I stared at the blinking green light of the speakerphone, picturing her standing there in her expensive cashmere coat, suddenly realizing the ground beneath her feet was turning to ash. I mean that American Express did not freeze the card, Beatrice. I did. You did what? I froze the card, I repeated, enunciating every syllable with crystal clear precision. I reported it compromised the exact second I stepped out of Terminal 4. I canceled all pending authorizations. I liquidated the hold on the penthouse suite. I canceled the private yacht charter on the Seine. I canceled the VIP Louvre tour. And I canceled the reservations at Le Cinq and Arpège. I paused, letting the immense, crushing weight of those words settle over the 3,000 miles of ocean between us. You don't have a hotel room, Mother. You don't have an itinerary. You are currently standing in one of the most expensive lobbies in the world with absolutely no way to pay for so much as a bottle of sparkling water. Are you insane? Beatrice suddenly shrieked, all pretense of wealthy, refined decorum completely vanishing. Her voice echoed terribly, and I knew for a fact that wealthy Parisian socialites and impeccably dressed hotel staff were now openly staring at her. You cannot do this! I am your mother! Today is my 60th birthday! We flew all night. You are going to ruin the entire trip over a stupid, petty little tantrum about a first-class seat? A petty tantrum? I echoed, a dark, humorless laugh escaping my throat. Is that what you think this is? Elena, unfreeze the goddamn card right now! Chloe's voice suddenly cut in, hysterical and shrill, clearly having snatched the phone from Beatrice's hand. Are you literally psycho? We are in Paris! My followers are expecting a room tour of the penthouse. Jackson is furious. You are acting like a jealous, bitter, ugly... Chloe, I interrupted, my voice cracking through the speaker like a physical whip. It was a tone of voice I used in the boardroom to instantly silence arrogant, misbehaving executives. It was a voice devoid of sibling affection, devoid of sisterly leniency. It was the voice of the CFO. Chloe instantly shut up. Put me back on speakerphone, I commanded. Both of you are going to listen to me very, very carefully because I am only going to explain your new reality once. I heard the rustle of the phone, And then Beatrice's heavy, panicked breathing returned to the line. For 32 years, I began, my voice perfectly measured, slicing through the air with surgical precision. I have played the role you assigned to me. I was the scapegoat. I was the unrefined, masculine, boring workhorse. But more importantly, I was the sole financial pillar holding up the pathetic, crumbling illusion of the Vance family's wealth. Elena, please, lower your voice. People are staring. Beatrice tried to hiss, completely mortified by the public spectacle she was now the center of. I am not in the lobby, Beatrice. You are, I reminded her brutally. You wanted to trade my first-class seat for a stranger to preserve your aesthetic? You wanted to discard me at the airport because my presence was a buzzkill. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. You are free of me. But you also just learned the most basic, fundamental rule of economics. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. You cannot fire the bank and still expect to receive a paycheck. You arrogant little bitch, Beatrice snarled, her voice vibrating with a sudden, venomous hatred that no mother should ever direct at a child. You think because you make a few dollars you can treat us like peasants? We are family. I gave you life. You owe me this trip. You owe me respect. I will call our lawyers. I will sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress. You'll call your lawyers? I asked, genuinely amused, a cold smile touching my lips. With what retainer, Mother? How are you going to pay a lawyer? Let's take a quick inventory of your actual assets, shall we? I clicked my mouse, bringing up a spreadsheet I had finalized late last night after returning from the airport. Your precious country club membership in Westchester? The one where you sit and drink martinis and gossip about your friends? The monthly dues are $5,000. I pay them. I just called the membership director an hour ago and canceled the account. If you try to drive through those gates, security will turn you around. You canceled my club? Beatrice whispered, sounding as if I had just physically struck her. I'm not finished, I continued mercilessly. The brand new Mercedes convertible sitting in the driveway? The one Chloe uses to drive to her failed yoga studios? It's leased under my LLC. I contacted the dealership this morning. They are sending a recovery team to repossess the vehicle at noon today. My car? You can't take my car! Chloe screamed in the background, bursting into loud theatrical sobs. And finally, the crown jewel, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet, intimate whisper. The Westchester house. Don't you dare! Beatrice gasped, her breath catching in her throat. That is my home. That is the family estate. No, Beatrice, it is not your home, I corrected her, dropping the word mother entirely. It hasn't been your home since Dad died 10 years ago and left you hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. When the bank came to foreclose, I stepped in. I didn't just pay off the second mortgage. I bought the deed from the bank to save you from being thrown out on the street. I am the sole legal owner of that property. You have been living there as a non-paying, at-will tenant. You wouldn't, Beatrice stammered, the absolute reality of her situation finally crashing down upon her. The arrogant, untouchable director of the play had just realized the theater had been demolished around her. Elena, please. I'm your mother. You lost the right to use that word at the check-in desk, I replied, feeling not an ounce of pity, only the exhilarating rush of absolute, untouchable freedom. Before I walked into my office this morning, I retained a real estate attorney. Notice of eviction is being taped to the heavy mahogany front doors of the Westchester house as we speak. You have 30 days to remove your belongings before the property is listed for sale. Elena, wait! Listen to me! Beatrice pleaded, her voice entirely broken, the haughty veneer completely stripped away, revealing the terrified, bankrupt fraud underneath. We are in Paris. We don't have anywhere to sleep. The concierge is threatening to call the police if we don't leave the lobby. We don't even have return tickets. You canceled everything. That sounds like a terrible logistical problem, I said smoothly. Perhaps Chloe can leverage her 3,000 bot Instagram followers to secure a brand deal with a local hostel. Or perhaps Jackson's friend, the one who took my seat, can wire you some cash. Elena, please! Beatrice was openly weeping now, begging over the speakerphone, her pride completely annihilated in front of the wealthy Parisian elite she worshipped so desperately. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay you back. I'll treat you better. Just unfreeze the card. Just get us a room. Please, don't leave us here like this. For 32 years, I had waited to hear my mother apologize to me. I had moved mountains, funded empires, and bled myself dry just to hear those words. But now, as they finally echoed out of the speaker on my desk, they tasted like ash. They weren't an apology for how she treated me. They were a desperate, pathetic negotiation from a hostage who realized her captor had just walked away with the only key. I'm sorry, Beatrice, I said, my voice resolute, the heavy steel vault door in my chest locking permanently. But the aesthetic of this trip has officially changed. Enjoy Paris. Before she could scream another word, before Chloe could sob another tear, I reached out and pressed the red button on my phone. Click. The line went dead. The silence that rushed back into my corner office was profound. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of walking on eggshells. It was the vast, expansive silence of a clear sky after a devastating hurricane. I sat there for a long moment, looking at my phone, completely still. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt or regret. I felt light. I felt as if a 1,000-pound weight of toxic, parasitic obligation had just been surgically removed from my spine. I picked up my phone, navigated to the contact labeled Mother, and hit block caller. I did the same for Chloe. Then, I turned my attention back to my 3 monitors, pulling up the quarterly projections for Vanguard Logistics. I took another sip of my espresso, the bitter taste suddenly sweet with the absolute, undeniable victory of self-preservation. The illusion was dead. The leeches were severed. The Bank of Elena was closed forever, and my day was just beginning. While I sat in the hushed, climate-controlled sanctuary of my 72nd floor office, watching the tiny yellow taxicabs navigate the concrete canyons of Lower Manhattan, the grand, suffocating illusion of the Vance family was violently crashing into the imported marble floors of the Four Seasons Hotel Georges V in Paris. To truly appreciate the cinematic perfection of their ruin, you must picture the setting. The lobby of the Georges V is not merely a hotel entrance. It is a globally recognized temple of old-world opulence. The air is thick with the custom scent of thousands of fresh, imported white orchids and hydrangeas, masterfully arranged in towering crystal vases that cost more than most luxury cars. The floors are a flawless expanse of highly polished, intricate marble mosaic. Overhead, massive, tiered crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden, forgiving light over the world's elite. Oil barons, tech billionaires, and European royalty sipping vintage espresso from delicate Limoges porcelain cups. It is a place where voices are rarely raised above a cultured, elegant whisper, and where the word no simply does not exist for those who can afford the astronomical price of admission. Standing dead center in this cathedral of wealth, looking like a shattered porcelain doll, was my mother, Beatrice. She was staring down at her iPhone, the screen displaying a harsh, unforgiving message. Call failed. User unreachable. Her heavily manicured thumb furiously tapped my contact name. Again, and again, and again. But the heavy steel vault door was sealed. The line remained dead. Slowly, the blood began to drain from her perfectly contoured face, leaving her pale, wide-eyed, and trembling. The sheer, incomprehensible reality of what had just occurred was finally penetrating the thick, impenetrable armor of her narcissism. I hadn't just hung up on her. I had financially decapitated her. Standing behind the massive, gilded antique reception desk was Monsieur Laurent, the chief concierge. He was a man of impeccable posture, dressed in a tailored midnight blue morning suit, his lapel adorned with the crossed golden keys of Les Clés d'Or. He possessed the kind of polite, terrifyingly calm demeanor that could only be cultivated by decades of dealing with the ultra-rich. He had been quietly, patiently observing the chaotic phone call, his expression carefully neutral, though his sharp eyes missed absolutely nothing. "Madame," Monsieur Laurent said softly, his voice a smooth, clipped baritone carrying a flawless French accent that cut through the agonizing silence. "Is there an issue with the primary cardholder?" Beatrice jumped slightly, tearing her eyes away from her useless phone. She looked up at Monsieur Laurent, her chest heaving as she desperately tried to reassemble her mask of arrogant superiority. But it was too late. The panic was bleeding through the cracks. My daughter," Beatrice stammered, her voice suddenly lacking its usual commanding resonance. "She is having a childish tantrum. It is a misunderstanding. A temporary glitch with her bank. She will fix it shortly." Monsieur Laurent offered a small, entirely unsympathetic smile. "I understand, madame. Family matters can be quite complex. However, as I explained previously, the American Express Centurion account holding the reservation for the penthouse suite, as well as all associated incidentals, has been permanently frozen by the issuer. All pre-authorizations have been legally voided. At this juncture, the reservation is considered null." "You can't just cancel my room!" Chloe suddenly screeched, her voice echoing shrilly off the marble pillars, slicing through the quiet, refined ambiance of the lobby like a rusty blade. Several wealthy guests, sitting in the velvet armchairs, turned their heads, their expressions shifting from mild curiosity to open, aristocratic distaste. "We flew first class! I have 3,000 followers expecting a room tour! You literally cannot do this to us!" Monsieur Laurent did not flinch at the outburst. He merely shifted his gaze to Chloe, assessing her entirely fabricated luxury wardrobe with a single, devastating glance, before returning his attention to Beatrice. "I assure you, mademoiselle, the hotel is not canceling anything," Monsieur Laurent corrected gently, though his tone was laced with absolute, unyielding iron. "Your financial institution has declined to cover the cost of the accommodations. The penthouse suite is currently priced at 22,000 euros per night, with a minimum required incidental hold of 50,000 euros. If you wish to maintain the reservation, I simply require a valid method of payment for the balance." He extended a graceful, manicured hand, palm up, waiting. Beatrice swallowed hard, her throat visibly bobbing. The illusion was collapsing in real time. She frantically unclasped her designer handbag, a bag I had paid for, and pulled out her own wallet. With a shaking hand, she produced a platinum-colored credit card and slapped it onto the marble counter. "Run this," Beatrice ordered, trying to sound authoritative, though her voice shook with desperation. "Put the hold on this card." Monsieur Laurent picked up the card with the tips of his fingers, as if handling something slightly unsanitary. He slid it into the heavy brass card reader. "Beep. Decline." The machine flashed red. Beatrice gasped. "Run it again! The machine is broken!" Monsieur Laurent obliged without a word. "Beep. Decline, Madame, he said softly, sliding the useless plastic back across the marble. The transaction is declined. Insufficient credit limit. That's impossible, Beatrice lied, knowing full well that card had been maxed out for 3 years, sustained only by the minimum monthly payments I silently made on her behalf. She turned to Chloe, her eyes wild, her carefully constructed aesthetic completely abandoned. Chloe, give him your card, the one for your business. Chloe physically recoiled, clutching her lambskin bag to her chest. Mom, no! That's my business account! Elena put 20 grand in there last month, but I spent it. I had to buy the Balenciaga boots for this trip, and I prepaid for the PR agency. You spent $20,000 on boots and Instagram likes? Beatrice hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, finally realizing the absolute uselessness of the golden child she had pampered her entire life. It was precisely at this moment that Jackson, the unemployed amateur DJ, finally grasped the catastrophic mathematics of the situation. He had been standing slightly apart from them, leaning against a marble pillar, furiously chewing his gum and texting. He slowly lowered his phone, looking at Beatrice, then at Chloe, and finally at the mountain of heavy, expensive luggage sitting in the middle of the lobby. Wait, Jackson said, his voice loud and incredibly grating in the quiet space. Are you guys telling me you're broke? Like actually broke? You don't even have a hotel room? Jackson, please, stay out of this, Chloe whined, reaching out to grab his arm. My sister is just being a psycho bitch. We'll figure it out. We'll call a lawyer. Jackson easily sidestepped her grasp, holding his hands up in a gesture of complete surrender. The sheer, parasitic survival instinct of a professional grifter kicked in instantaneously. Yeah, no, I'm not doing this, Jackson said, shaking his head. He reached down, grabbed the handle of his single scuffed duffel bag from the pile of luggage, and hoisted it onto his shoulder. Tyler just texted me. He's at a hostel in the Murray district with some girls they met on the flight. I'm gonna go crash with them. Jackson, you can't leave me! Chloe shrieked, genuine panic finally overtaking her performative whining. We are in a foreign country. You are my boyfriend. We've been dating for 3 weeks, Chloe, Jackson scoffed, looking at her as if she were a piece of trash stuck to his shoe. I'm here for the yacht and the free champagne, not to sleep on the street with your crazy mom. Good luck. Without a backward glance, the unemployed DJ turned and walked out of the heavy glass revolving doors, disappearing into the Parisian afternoon, taking the last microscopic shred of Chloe's dignity with him. Chloe stood frozen for a second, before bursting into loud, hysterical, ugly tears. Her perfectly applied mascara began to run down her cheeks in thick, black rivers. She sank onto her knees right there in the middle of the Georges V lobby, sobbing into her hands. A complete and utter spectacle. Beatrice stood paralyzed, watching her daughter melt down on the floor, the whispers and stares of the surrounding billionaires burning into her skin like physical acid. She had orchestrated this trip to prove her superiority, to bask in the ultimate luxury, to show the world that she belonged to the elite class. Instead, she was starring in a public, humiliating display of utter destitution. Monsieur Laurent cleared his throat gently. Beatrice snapped her head back to him, her eyes wide with terror. Madame, the concierge said, his tone no longer accommodating but definitively final. As you currently hold no reservation, and as your party is now causing a significant disturbance to our distinguished guests, I must ask you to vacate the premises immediately. You are throwing us out? Beatrice whispered, the reality completely breaking her. Where are we supposed to go? We have all these bags. We don't have a car. We don't have a flight home for 10 days. That is entirely outside the purview of this establishment, Monsieur Laurent replied coldly. He raised a hand, snapping his fingers twice. Instantly, two massive, impeccably dressed hotel security guards materialized from the shadows near the elevator banks. They moved with silent, terrifying efficiency. One stepped behind the desk to flank Monsieur Laurent, while the other stepped right up to Beatrice. "Madame," the security guard said in heavily accented English, gesturing toward the heavy glass doors. "S'il vous plaît, you must leave, now." "Don't touch me!" Beatrice shrieked as the guard gently but firmly took her by the elbow of her expensive cashmere coat. "I am a VIP. I will have your jobs. I will destroy this hotel on Yelp." The threats were utterly meaningless. The guards expertly and effortlessly guided the sobbing, hysterical Chloe to her feet and escorted both women out of the lobby. A trio of bellhops immediately descended on the mountain of Prada and lambskin luggage, rapidly rolling it out the front doors and depositing it unceremoniously onto the cobblestone sidewalk of Avenue George V. The heavy, gilded, revolving doors spun to a halt. The doorman, a towering man in a top hat, turned his back to them, resuming his stoic watch. Beatrice and Chloe were left standing on the cold, unforgiving pavement of Paris. The crisp, beautiful October weather had suddenly shifted, and a freezing, miserable drizzle began to fall from the gray sky, dampening Beatrice's perfect hair and leaving dark water spots on Chloe's precious lambskin bags. They were totally, spectacularly, and legally ruined. But the vengeance was not confined to a single continent. True, absolute destruction is a multi-front war, and the heavy artillery was currently landing 3,000 miles away, deep in the heart of Westchester County. While Beatrice and Chloe were being thrown onto the street, it was approximately high noon in New York. The suburban neighborhood where my family's McMansion sat was a picture of serene, affluent tranquility. Lawns were being meticulously edged by landscaping crews. Delivery vans dropped off packages from Net-a-Porter. The quiet hum of immense privilege filled the air. Then the aggressive, hydraulic roar of a massive, heavy-duty tow truck shattered the peace. The truck, painted a blinding industrial yellow with the words "recovery" and "asset seizure" emblazoned on the side, rumbled down the pristine, tree-lined street. It didn't slow down as it approached the Vance estate. It swung wide, its heavy tires crushing the manicured edge of the lawn, and reversed violently into the sweeping, circular gravel driveway. Simultaneously, a Westchester County Sheriff's cruiser, its light bar flashing a bright, authoritative red and blue, pulled up and parked parallel to the curb, blocking the driveway entirely. The noise immediately drew the attention of the neighborhood. Across the street, Mrs. Harrington, a woman whose primary occupation was organizing the country club charity gala and fiercely competing with my mother for the title of neighborhood queen bee, was walking her purebred standard poodle. She froze on the sidewalk, her jaw dropping as she watched the chaotic scene unfold. A burly man in a high-visibility vest hopped out of the tow truck. He didn't knock on the door. He didn't ask permission. He walked straight up to the gleaming, brand-new white Mercedes convertible sitting proudly in front of the house. With practiced, ruthless efficiency, he slid the heavy steel forks under the front tires and engaged the hydraulic lift. The moment the car's front end hoisted into the air, the vehicle's anti-theft system triggered. A blaring, obnoxious siren erupted from the Mercedes, the headlights flashing wildly, drawing even more attention. Landscapers stopped their mowers. Neighbors stepped out onto their sprawling porches. While the repo man secured the chains, the sheriff stepped out of his cruiser. He was holding a thick manila folder and a roll of heavy-duty tape. He walked up the stone pathway, past the fake Tuscan columns, and approached the massive imported mahogany double doors. He didn't bother ringing the bell, knowing the occupants were out of the country. He simply peeled the backing off a massive, fluorescent pink piece of paper and slapped it dead center on the dark wood, taping all four corners securely. Even from across the street, Mrs. Harrington could read the bold, black, unmistakable block letters printed at the top of the notice. Notice to vacate/writ of eviction, property foreclosure/change of ownership. Mrs. Harrington didn't gasp. She didn't look away in polite embarrassment. She smiled a vicious, triumphant little smile. She reached into the pocket of her tailored activewear, pulled out her iPhone, and zoomed in on the pink notice and the repo truck dragging the screaming Mercedes out of the driveway. Click. Before the tow truck had even shifted into drive to haul the seized asset away, that photograph was uploaded to the Westchester Ladies Country Club Executive Committee group chat. The text accompanying the photo was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive venom. "Oh my stars! Does anyone know if Beatrice is okay? I just saw the sheriff evicting her and repossessing Chloe's car. I knew she was lying about paying for that Paris trip. So sad to see a family fall apart over financial ruin." The social annihilation was instantaneous, absolute, and permanent. Beatrice's carefully curated, desperately maintained facade of generational wealth and superiority was vaporized in the span of 30 seconds. She was no longer the queen bee. She was the neighborhood cautionary tale, the bankrupt fraud who got thrown out of her own house. If she ever tried to show her face at the country club again, she would be met with locked doors and the mocking laughter of women she had spent decades trying to impress. Back in my office, high above the clouds of Manhattan, my desk phone buzzed softly. I tapped the blinking light. "Yes, Sarah?" I asked, speaking to my executive assistant. "Ms. Vance, I just received confirmation from the legal department." Sarah's professional voice crackled through the speaker. "The eviction notice has been successfully served at the Westchester property, and the vehicle recovery team confirmed the Mercedes is currently in transit to the impound lot. The lease has been officially terminated." I leaned back in my heavy leather chair, turning to look out at the breathtaking view of the city skyline. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the absolute stillness in my chest. "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, a genuine, powerful smile spreading across my face. "Please ensure the real estate agents are scheduled to begin showing the property exactly 30 days from today, and hold all my calls for the rest of the afternoon. I am enjoying the view." I disconnected the line. The vengeance was not messy. It wasn't violent. It was a perfectly executed, bureaucratic symphony of consequences. My mother and sister were currently sitting on a wet bench in Paris, their luggage soaking in the rain, with no money, no hotel, and no way home. And even if they miraculously managed to beg or borrow enough money for a flight back to New York, they would land only to find the locks changed, their car gone, and their social standing reduced to absolute ash. They had tried to bury the workhorse. They had tried to discard the mule, but they completely forgot that the mule was carrying all the gold. And when the mule finally walked away, they were left with absolutely nothing but the crushing weight of their own terrifying reality. By 5:30 p.m., the manic, pulsating energy of the Manhattan financial district began to shift. The frantic daytime hustle of billionaires and brokers gave way to the deep, golden hour of early evening. The sun began its slow descent behind the Hudson River, casting long, dramatic shadows and painting the glass and steel skyscrapers in vibrant hues of bruised violet, burnt orange, and shimmering bronze. I sat at my massive black marble desk for a long time after ending the call with my assistant. I didn't look at spreadsheets. I didn't review Q3 projections. I simply sat there, existing in a space I had occupied for years, but feeling as though I was occupying it for the very first time. For the past decade, every single quiet moment in my life had been aggressively haunted by the specter of my family's impending crises. If my phone was silent, my chest was usually tight with the agonizing anticipation of the next disaster. I would sit in this very chair, waiting for the inevitable text from Beatrice demanding more money for a country club gala, or the frantic, tearful call from Chloe because she had overdrawn her business account again. My nervous system had been permanently wired to the frequency of their chaos. But now, the silence in my office wasn't a warning sign. It was a monument. It was the vast, breathless quiet of a war that had finally, definitively ended. I reached out and placed my hand flat against the cool, polished surface of the marble desk. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the pristine, climate-controlled air, and felt a physical sensation I hadn't experienced since I was a child. My shoulders, which had spent 32 years hunched against the psychological weight of their crushing expectations, naturally dropped. The chronic, dull ache at the base of my neck, the physical manifestation of being the family's designated pack mule, simply evaporated. I felt impossibly light. I felt as though gravity itself had surrendered its hold on me. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. I smoothed the front of my tailored, charcoal gray Tom Ford suit. I picked up my cell phone, glancing one last time at the screen. 0 notifications, 0 missed calls. The blockade was absolute. I slipped the phone into my designer handbag, grabbed my keys, and walked toward the heavy oak doors of my office. When I pulled the doors open and stepped out into the executive suite, the atmosphere was entirely different from the chaotic purgatory of the JFK check-in lounge. Here, I was not an embarrassment. I was not a buzzkill. I was the apex predator of my environment. "Good evening, Miss Vance," Sarah, my executive assistant, said softly, standing up from behind her pristine reception desk. She handed me a leather-bound portfolio containing the signed eviction and repossession documents I had requested. "Everything has been fully executed. The legal team has confirmed the locks in Westchester will be changed by 8 a.m. tomorrow." "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, my voice smooth, resonant, and entirely at peace. "You did excellent work today. Take the rest of the week off. Go enjoy the city." Sarah blinked, a genuine, warm smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, Ms. Vance. Have a wonderful weekend." I walked toward the private executive elevator, my heels clicking against the imported Brazilian walnut floors. The sound was rhythmic, authoritative, and utterly unbothered. I didn't rush. I didn't shrink to make myself smaller. I walked with the slow, deliberate cadence of a woman who owns the very ground she walks on. I pressed the call button. The heavy chrome doors slid open silently, and I stepped inside the mahogany-paneled car. As the elevator began its rapid 72-floor descent toward the lobby, I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment of pure, uninterrupted visualization. It was 11:30 p.m. in Paris. While I was descending in a private elevator, bathed in warm light and absolute security, Beatrice and Chloe were completely exposed to the unforgiving elements of a foreign city. The miserable, freezing drizzle that had started in the afternoon would have evolved into a biting, relentless European downpour by now. I pictured them sitting on a wet, wrought iron bench somewhere near the Champs-Élysées, shivering violently in their damp, ruined designer clothes. I pictured the towering pile of heavy, scuffed lambskin and Prada luggage sitting in puddles of filthy street water, the exquisite leather warping and bubbling in the rain. I imagined Beatrice, her perfectly coiffed platinum hair plastered to her skull, her phone dead, her massive ego shattered into a million jagged, irreparable pieces. I imagined Chloe, stripped of her fake Instagram aesthetic, crying until she had no tears left, finally realizing that she possessed absolutely no real-world survival skills. They were surrounded by the most beautiful, romantic city on earth, and they were completely locked out of it. The golden gates of luxury they felt so entitled to had slammed shut in their faces, entirely because they chose to bite the hand that was literally funding their existence. The elevator chimed, a soft, pleasant ping that pulled me from my thoughts. The doors slid open to reveal the cavernous white marble lobby of the Vanguard Logistics Building. Two massive security guards in dark suits immediately straightened their posture as I walked past. "Good evening, Miss Vance," they echoed in unison, one of them rushing forward to hold open the towering glass exit doors. "Gentlemen," I nodded respectfully, stepping through the threshold and out into the vibrant electric air of the New York evening. The city was alive. The crisp October wind whipped down Wall Street, carrying the scent of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor and the sharp, metallic tang of the impending winter. It was a smell of ambition. It was the smell of freedom. Tonight, I hadn't called Marcus to bring the town car. Tonight, I needed to drive myself. I needed to feel the absolute, raw power of my own momentum. I walked half a block to the private, subterranean VIP parking garage. The attendant saw me approaching and immediately scrambled to his booth, pressing a button that raised the heavy steel security gate. I walked down the quiet, brightly lit concrete aisle until I reached my designated spot. Sitting there, looking like a crouching panther made of liquid metal, was my personal vehicle. A custom metallic charcoal Aston Martin DBS Superleggera. It was a magnificent, violent piece of British engineering, a twin turbocharged V12 monster that I had bought for myself in cash 3 years ago, but rarely drove because Beatrice always claimed sports cars were tacky and aggressive. I pulled the key fob from my bag. The car chirped, the sleek LED headlights flashing aggressively in the dim garage, the flush door handles gliding smoothly outward to greet me. I slid into the low, bucketed leather seat. The interior smelled of rich, intoxicating mahogany and bespoke leather. I pressed the glass ignition button in the center console. The engine didn't just start. It detonated. A deep, guttural, terrifying roar echoed off the concrete walls of the parking garage, a sound that vibrated straight through my bones. It was the auditory equivalent of a lion roaring to claim its territory. I gripped the heavy Alcantara-wrapped steering wheel, feeling the immense, coiled power resting literally at my fingertips. I shifted into drive and let off the brake. The Aston Martin prowled out of the garage and onto the bustling streets of Manhattan. As I drove north up the West Side Highway, the cinematic perfection of the moment fully washed over me. I rolled the windows down just a few inches, letting the cold, biting wind rush into the cabin, violently whipping my hair around my face. I didn't care. I felt completely, dangerously alive. To my left, the dark, churning waters of the Hudson River reflected the glittering lights of New Jersey. To my right, the towering, illuminated skyline of the city I had conquered stood as a testament to my own relentless grit. The streetlights flashed rhythmically over the hood of the car, a mesmerizing, strobing pulse of gold and white. Every time I accelerated, the V12 engine roared, pressing me back into the fine leather seats. With every mile I drove, it felt as though I was putting an entire universe of distance between myself and the toxic, parasitic history of the Vance family. They were gone. The Westchester house was a memory. The agonizing holidays were canceled forever. The guilt was dead. The obligations were buried. I was no longer an extra in Beatrice's pathetic, staged theatrical production. I was the sole author, director, and star of my own magnificent reality. I took the exit for Tribeca, navigating the narrow, cobblestone streets until I reached the heavily fortified entrance of my luxury high-rise. The valets rushed forward as I pulled the Aston Martin to a stop, the engine purring to a low, satisfied rumble. I stepped out of the car, handing the keys to a wide-eyed valet, and walked into the lobby. I didn't look back. My private elevator opened directly into my penthouse. It was a sprawling 4,000 square foot masterpiece of modern minimalist architecture. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed, breathtaking, 270-degree view of the Manhattan skyline and the Brooklyn Bridge. The space was completely devoid of clutter, devoid of heavy, suffocating drapes, devoid of gilded mirrors and fake Tuscan columns. It was a temple of peace. I walked slowly across the wide plank oak floors, the silence of the apartment wrapping around me like a heavy, comforting blanket. I walked over to my custom wet bar, grabbed a heavy crystal tumbler, and poured myself a generous measure of 18-year-old Yamazaki single malt. I walked toward the massive glass doors leading out to my private wraparound terrace. I pressed a button on the wall, and the heavy glass silently glided open, inviting the cold, electric night air into the room. I stepped out onto the balcony, 70 floors above the streets of New York. The wind immediately caught my clothes, howling softly against the glass railing. The city was spread out beneath me, like a glittering carpet of diamonds and crushed velvet, infinitely vast and impossibly beautiful. I walked to the edge of the glass railing and looked down at the tiny, moving lights of the cars below. Then I looked up, out across the endless horizon. I thought about the little girl who used to sit in a cold Brooklyn studio apartment, eating instant ramen and studying until her eyes bled, desperately hoping that if she just made enough money, her mother would finally love her. I thought about the woman who stood in JFK Terminal, carrying 3 heavy Prada bags that weren't hers, being told she was a pathetic, unlovable buzzkill. I raised my crystal tumbler, the amber liquid catching the ambient light of the city. To the aesthetic, I whispered into the wind, a slow, dangerous, incredibly beautiful smile spreading across my face. I took a slow sip of the whiskey, letting the fire burn down my throat. I stood there, on the edge of the world, feeling the cold breeze of total, absolute freedom. I was untouchable. I was unbreakable. The toxic family that had tried to drown me had shrunk into the absolute microscopic background of my life, gone forever, swallowed by the catastrophic consequences of their own making. The screen fades to black, the sound of the howling wind blending with the distant, powerful roar of the city, leaving nothing but the undeniable sensation of total, triumphant victory. The cinematic frame of the Manhattan skyline slowly dissolves, fading to black, before the camera cuts back to the warm, intimate, dimly lit studio. The heavy, dramatic atmosphere of the narrative lingers in the air, a palpable electricity. I am sitting across from you, leaning forward, looking directly into the lens with absolute, unflinching sincerity. We have just witnessed the complete, spectacular, and legally flawless dismantling of a toxic family empire. We have watched a woman who was treated like a pack mule finally drop the baggage, turn around, and reclaim her throne. But the story of Elena, Beatrice, and Chloe is not just a work of fiction designed to entertain you for half an hour. It is a mirror. It is a highly magnified, surgically precise reflection of a deeply sick, incredibly common family dynamic that is happening in millions of households across the globe right at this very second. Let us take a moment to completely deconstruct the psychology of what we just experienced. Because there is a profound, life-altering lesson buried in the rubble of that Parisian hotel lobby and that foreclosed Westchester estate. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this video, I need you to burn this single, unshakable truth into your subconscious. Blood does not equal a blank check. From the moment we are old enough to comprehend language, we are brainwashed by a societal matrix that aggressively protects abusers under the impenetrable shield of family. We are bombarded with toxic platitudes like, family is everything, you only get one mother, and You have to forgive them. They are your own flesh and blood. These phrases are not just harmless cliches. They are psychological shackles. They are weapons forged by generations of dysfunctional people, specifically designed to trap highly capable, empathetic individuals in a perpetual cycle of servitude. Society demands that you sign a blank check to your family the day you are born. And I am not just talking about a financial check, although, as we saw with Elena, the financial vampirism is very real. I am talking about a blank check for your mental health, a blank check for your emotional stability, a blank check for your dignity, your self-esteem, and your most precious, non-renewable resource, your time. When you exist in a family system governed by a narcissistic parent like Beatrice, you are never viewed as an independent, autonomous human being. You are viewed exclusively as an extension of their ego or a tool to facilitate their survival. In this deeply toxic ecosystem, roles are assigned at birth and they are ruthlessly enforced. There is always the golden child, the Chloe of the family. The golden child is the narcissistic parent's projected fantasy. They are pampered, coddled, and shielded from every single natural consequence of their own terrible decisions. They are taught that the world owes them a living and that accountability is a form of abuse. But make no mistake, the golden child is ultimately a tragic figure because they are intentionally crippled. They are kept weak, incompetent, and dependent, so the parent can forever play the role of the benevolent savior. And then there is you, the scapegoat, the workhorse, the fixer. You were the child who looked around at the chaos, realized nobody was coming to save you, and decided to save yourself. You became hyper-independent. You achieved massive success. You built an incredible life, a formidable career, and a solid foundation. But instead of celebrating your triumphs, your toxic family immediately identified your strength as a resource to be harvested. They looked at your sprawling, beautiful oak tree of a life, and instead of admiring it, they wrapped themselves around your trunk like a parasitic vine. And every single time you tried to set a boundary, every time you tried to trim back the vines to catch some sunlight for yourself, they called you selfish. They called you arrogant. They told the rest of the forest that you were a monster for not letting them strangle you to death. Think about the sheer, unadulterated entitlement of a mother who can look her exhausted, fiercely successful daughter in the eye at an airport terminal, hand her first-class seat to a literal stranger to preserve an aesthetic, and still expect that daughter to fund a $500,000 vacation. That is the absolute pinnacle of narcissistic delusion. They genuinely believe that the rules of gravity, the rules of economics, and the basic rules of human decency do not apply to them. They believe they can openly despise the bank, mock the bank teller, spit on the vault, and still expect the ATM to dispense crisp $100 bills on command. But as Elena so beautifully demonstrated, the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the table and walk out of the casino. Walking away from a toxic family member is the most agonizing, terrifying, and profoundly difficult decision a human being can ever make. It is not a decision made in a vacuum. It is a decision made after years, sometimes decades, of silent suffering, broken promises, and thousands of tiny, excruciating cuts to your soul. When you finally freeze the card, when you finally block the number, when you finally pack your bags and leave, society will try to make you the villain. The flying monkeys, the aunts, the uncles, the family friends who only ever heard the abuser's twisted version of the story will swarm your inbox, calling you cruel, calling you cold, calling you unforgiving. Let them think whatever they want to think, because their comfort is no longer your responsibility. We need to aggressively redefine what it means to be selfish. In a toxic family dynamic, selfish is simply the word an abuser uses when they discover they can no longer control you. When you stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, they will complain about the cold. That does not make you a pyromaniac. It makes you a survivor. You have to understand that true, permanent healing is mathematically impossible in the exact same environments that broke you. You cannot cure a venomous snake bite while the fangs are still deeply embedded in your arm. You have to physically remove the threat, draw out the poison, and walk away from the swamp. This is the ultimate form of self-preservation. It is the realization that your life is a singular, magnificent, unrepeatable event. You do not get a second chance at your 30s, your 40s, or your 50s. Every single day you spend agonizing over a text message from a toxic mother. Every dollar you drain from your retirement account to bail out an irresponsible sibling is a day and a dollar stolen from your own future. It is a theft of your joy, your peace, and your absolute right to thrive. When Elena stood on that balcony overlooking the glittering expanse of Manhattan, raising a glass of whiskey to the night sky, she was not just celebrating a financial victory over her mother and sister. She was mourning the family she deserved but never received, and simultaneously celebrating the birth of the woman she was always meant to be. The heavy steel vault door in her chest didn't just lock out the abusers. It locked in her own immense, untouchable power. There is a grief in walking away, yes. You have to mourn the illusion. You have to mourn the mother you desperately wanted, the sister you wished you had, the idyllic Thanksgiving dinners that only ever existed in commercials. But I promise you, with every fiber of my being, the grief of walking away is a fraction of the agony of staying. The silence that follows the block button is not empty. It is expansive. It is the breathtaking quiet of a clear sky after a devastating lifelong hurricane. It is the space where your true life finally begins. Right now, as you are watching this, I know there is a massive percentage of you who are standing precisely on that terrifying precipice. You are hovering your finger over the block button. You are staring at the transfer screen on your banking app, agonizing over whether to send that rent money to a sibling who has never once said thank you. You are sitting in your car in the driveway, your stomach tied in suffocating knots, dreading the moment you have to turn the doorknob and face the emotional firing squad waiting in your living room. I am speaking directly to you right now. You owe them absolutely nothing. You did not ask to be born into that specific genetic lottery. You did not sign a contract agreeing to be the emotional shock absorber for grown adults who refuse to heal their own trauma. Your success, your peace, and your bank account are the direct results of your own blood, sweat, and tears. They are not communal property. It is time to close the bank. It is time to let the facade collapse. It is time to let them experience the pure, unadulterated, catastrophic consequences of their own monstrous behavior. Let them sleep in the bed they spent decades making, even if it means they have to sleep on the cobblestone streets of Paris. This is why this channel exists. This is why we tell these stories. We are not just here for the justice porn. We are here to completely shatter the stigma of the family estrangement narrative. We are here to validate the cycle breakers. If this story ignited a fire in your chest, if it validated a pain you have been carrying in silence for years, I need you to take action right now. First, I need you to scroll down to the comments section. The comments on this channel are not just a discussion board. They are a sacred text of resilience. They are a digital monument to survival. I want you to tell me your story. Have you ever had to execute a ruthless, necessary extraction from a toxic family system? What was the final straw? What was the exact moment the vault door clicked shut in your chest and you realized you were done playing their game? How did you take your absolute power back? Write it out. Do not hold back. Because I guarantee you, someone else is reading these comments right now, feeling entirely alone, drowning in the guilt manufactured by their abusers. Your specific story of triumph, your specific methodology of walking away, might be the exact blueprint they need to finally pack their bags and step into the light. You have the power to save someone's life today, just by sharing your truth. Second, if you haven't already, you must hit the like button on this video. Let the algorithm know that we are rejecting the toxic narrative of unconditional familial subservience. And most importantly, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. By subscribing, you are officially enlisting in an army of the fiercely independent. You are joining a global community of titans, cycle breakers, and self-made individuals who have looked the matrix in the eye and chosen absolute freedom. We are building a fortress here, and we want you inside the walls. Remember the ultimate lesson of Elena Vance. The people who try to bury you usually forget that you are a seed. And when you finally break through the dirt, when you finally grow into your immense power, you do not owe the dirt a single damn thing. Audit your life. Identify the toxic liabilities. Liquidate them without a single ounce of mercy. Know your worth. Demand absolute respect. And never, ever apologize for protecting your peace. I will see you in the next video.